Miko Badiola Borje, Karen Yu, and Go Home. Please enjoy it.
Hello, my name is Karen. I'm a percussionist, also sound artist, also a curator in sound art. I run this group called Contemporary Music in Hong Kong. Um, I actually did this whole, I did school on classical percussion, but somehow when I came back 5 years ago, I kind of went the other way. I started exploring body as an instrument and then sound objects for improvisation, etc. Um, for me today, I personally don't feel like I represent this genre called underground, but then I do work closely with a lot of my friends, performers, artists who work underground, and I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today to talk about this. And I know we all have different takes on this, but I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. But maybe we should get started with introducing you guys. Joseph, would you tell us about what you do?
Yeah, hi, I'm Joseph. I'm an art and cultural organizer and artist based in Hong Kong. I'm currently working in Eton HK as Director of Culture, that we build community for the marginalized group, artists and change maker, and also support different kind of marginalized community like LGBT group, ethnic minority, and different kind of artists and creative in Hong Kong. And for my own art practice, my works across the medium of like video art, installation, and performance. I'm also in an artist group called Virtual Village with my partner. Our exhibition, we have an exhibition is now showcasing in a gallery called PhD. Yeah, and back to the topic that just same as Karen, I don't think that I can represent underground because it's kind of like a work that quite problematic maybe. That, but I got many of friends that they are doing some kind of art and without any institutional support, and they're self-organizing them. That I think we can check about this kind of perspective, that how we think about the underground, that term. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think we all have different definitions on everything these days, so sometimes it's kind of heavy of like representing or talking on stage. And by the way, my name is Go Hang. Thank you for being here. Thank you for like being talking with me together. And so my practice, I usually collect materials from the streets or public space, and then I would try to transform them into some kind of recognizable objects like 烛光早安毛巾 or like a huge 50 cents, and then I would put them back onto the streets. And normally my intention of a new project is to record something that I normally see on the streets or public space, let's say. And so normally I throw a lot of rubbish to the street. That's my normal practice. So I collect rubbish, make something, and then throw them back to the street. So yeah, that's what I normally do. How about you, Miko?
Hi, I'm Miko Badiola Borje. I am an interdisciplinary artist. I recently graduated from Central St. Martin's with a degree in culture criticism and curation. So my arts practice is really grounded in cultural theory and engaging with social matters. The type of art that I do is drag. I'm not sure if many of you know about it, but it's a wonderful form of art that transcends gender and incorporates a lot of different genres of art, makeup, fashion, theater, film, and turns one person into a one-man production. So yeah, that's what I do. I feel like my connection to the word underground is like my I feel like underground means this self-selecting audience. It's because there's not many people who know about the art, or there's very little people that would go to such an art performance. Yeah.
I think when we were talking back there about audience, I think it also has a relationship with space because when we talk about underground, a lot of the time we would refer it as underground space, like underground.
Yeah.
But a lot of cases, it's just like with the limitation of space in Hong Kong, in music performance or sound performance, we do a lot of them in industrial spaces. I don't know about you guys, like how do you find space, the relationship between space and your practice?
Like space in Hong Kong is well known expensive, which is a challenge for everybody, I suppose. And my kind of deal with this issue is to use public space. So whenever I go, I would try to look at interesting public space spots. If I could make something kind of site specific, then I would try to make something at home and then bring it out. So I think that's so far from my experience, is my advantages. So it's a bit of a bottom-up action, like self-organizing, self-initiate, doing things without people giving you a space. But in a way, I think positively speaking, we still have like alternative in Hong Kong. I would say like industrial building is kind of affordable, kind of. But yeah, so far I would try to use public space because my practice is really cheap. Normally, that's how I describe it. Try not to buy a lot of stuff or rent a lot of space.
Speaking of public space, I'm also involved in some kind of like practice for showcasing in the abandoned industrial space or nature or this kind of art practices. I spot that there's two group of that appears and during the pandemic in Hong Kong, that there was a group called Corp Simulacrum. They were doing some kind of off-site exhibition that in the nature or some kind of abandoned space, putting their artwork there and trying to post it online because all the gallery have been closed during the pandemic. So people have start with this kind of tactic that instead of putting in a official gallery or institution, they are trying to do some kind of online showcase of offsite. And there is another group called Land Escape 182 and they are doing some kind of land art that are do some kind of site-specific exhibition with the material that collected in those kind of abandoned spaces. And this two group also emerged during the period of pandemic. I feel like besides that Hong Kong being a high rent and space, make the creator lack of such space to showcase their artwork, but also related to the pandemic when everything is closed, that how can we think creatively to like building another alternative to showcase our work.
I do love the mention of site-specific because I think in Hong Kong site-specific, it's like a growing approach to works because we don't always have the luxury to have proper spaces or a well-equipped spaces. We sometimes have to work around with the limitations we have. And Miko and I are performers. Do you think that space in a way is a limitation, or do you think it's a way for us to find a way around this at all?
I think it's a source of inspiration, definitely. There's been ways that my performance has evolved around the conventional use of the space, but there's also limitations, obviously, to that. There's been times where I've performed a solo show in like a Mexican restaurant, and there's like a huge sombrero inside, and so sometimes it really doesn't reflect the mood of the piece, and sometimes they're at odds with each other. But with the limited resources that we have as underground performers or artists with limited resources, like everyone is,
in sound performances, we always need all the equipment, the speakers, and all the. We even need more staff to handle the sound at the back. As you see, there are a lot of staff supporting us today. But in a lot of cases, when we have just a space, or even a space that isn't even in like a proper shape, we need extra support. We even need to have the artists to support us, to support this limitation. And sometimes I feel, in a way, bad because they have to go around the limitations we have. But also, it's very interesting for me to see them working around it and finding something new and something so inspirational after. And I think that it's super special to me.
I agree. Normally, I work with limitation. Like I'm cheap. Like I don't like to buy because I want to go against consumerism, and that limitation, in a way, actually helps because I need to find alternative or replacement,
Yeah.
and then somehow that work seems different or unexpected. And most of the time, I'm quite glad. So limitation is actually not too bad, I think, in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree that the limitation can push your boundary to further
Yeah.
more. And speaking for the space, I just think of something that you mentioned there are many performance in the industrial building, but actually those supposed to be illegal, right? Because speaking of that, the public pays for public entertainment license is so difficult to get in Hong Kong that you can't get it in the industrial building. So I feel like underground has working between the line of legal and illegal,
Yeah.
like many street arts, actually graffiti is kind of illegal if you do
I
it.
don't really spray paint, but a lot of writer who works on the streets, like all the OGs. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why that makes the underground scene interesting
Yeah.
because it's kind of like on the line, not popular, edgy, and actually you mentioned a few off-site performances. So you seems to know a lot about the underground scene. Where do you get information, Joseph?
I just have some friends, they want to, let's do something. Then, we don't have a official space, so we just hijacking some kind of public space and abandoned space and
I see.
just make something happen. It's just that kind of intuition that you want to make something happen that create that this kind of, works happen, yeah.
But normally, would you put it online before the event or the performance?
I have engaged in several kind of this kind of like offsite thing. There are different kind of approach but I did one with my boyfriend that we ran a truck and placed the truck in the Some Post Free Market. So it's full of different kind of guy fong there. Thought we are selling for something and some weird performance that people holding a pig heart that some kind of South Asian 朋友 thought that they're doing some kind of ritual black magic.
Awesome.
And this is full of this kind of like random or maybe mind-blowing things that we are trying to engage with different kind of audience because I feel like sometimes our audience is kind of boring because they know what you exactly doing. They familiar with your language. So sometimes I find that the public can be more interesting. Yeah.
True.
I love this touch on audience because obviously being in an underground venue, there's like a specific kind of audience that would go to these shows.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we do stuff that is not underground, we're expecting general audience too. But at underground, sometimes it is a way to build a community. It's like when I open my WhatsApp, there's like an image of nothing but a word saying next Saturday, 8 p.m. And then there's like no more information on it, just next Saturday, 8 p.m. And all you have to do is that you have to text that person, where is it? And you don't even ask what's happening because you're committed when you go to an underground performance, right? You kind of just like whatever that throws at you, if they are just vacuuming in the room, you'll just accept it. That's the performance. I don't know, Miko, have you done performances like that where?
I think whenever someone comes to a drag performance, they're like all bets are off. I perform mostly at like nightclub and those kind of venues, and so we advertise very minimally, just like you said, and yeah, like the type of performances that I do, there's dance involved, there's like music involved, there's a lot of different props involved, so there's a lot of unexpected things that I think can't really be explained on like an event poster. And so the audience really is going on a ride with us.
Yeah, and also I feel like, but I'm not that familiar with Jack, but I feel like Jack is kind of like a originally an inside thing for the queer community,
Yeah.
how to show the solidarity and how
Yeah.
we build space together and like a family.
Yeah.
And how do you feel this kind of like community building through this kind of underground art
Yeah.
form like Jack?
It's interesting because when I thought about the definition of underground as it relates to drag, I thought about how queerness and underground is kind of like synonymous in this situation, because it is a community building aspect. There is like a camaraderie that builds between an audience and the performer. So
We've been focusing a lot on performance, but go home. Like, how do you work with in public space? Like, do you how do you choose your objects? Like, do you obviously there's a kind of relationship between people and the object. Is that something that you based on?
Not really. I mean, object-wise, I normally pick up quite a lot of cardboard because they are really easy to deal with. I can tear them off, I can put them into water, blend them, or I can fold them. So cardboard is one of my major materials, but at the same time, I'm trying to not pick too much because I became a competitor with the people who collect cardboard for a living. So in a way, these days, I just use my own consumption. And to pick up a sport normally is, if it's easy. I'm kind of the opposite with the graffiti writer because they climb into somewhere like super dangerous. I'm kind of lazy in a way, but I would try to make them slightly high up, and I would try to make no damages to public space. Normally, that's my rule. That's my only rule. But yeah, audience-wise, I think unconsciously at the very beginning, I was trying to test what if an object being placed in here, a museum, commercial gallery, or even a public space. So I guess, yeah, maybe subconsciously I was trying to see the response. And so far, so it's interesting so far.
That's very interesting. I mean, I'm not too familiar with that part of undergroundness because when I was looking up underground, I was obviously going from my perspective of it.
Sure.
But sometimes I wonder like what the street art has in that is related to the undergroundness of this too. I think that's very interesting too.
I think for this street art wise is because normally you don't see who made it or who has done it or who painted it. I guess that's one of the strong elements of the undergroundness of street art. But I think in public space there are people performing, busking. Would you ever try, Karen? Have you ever considered?
No, I don't think people want to. You know, a lot of people who are on the street who would be watching busking performances are like, you know, casually like maybe having lunch by and then they walk by. And then there's me half naked trying to do a body as an instrument thing. I don't think they're gonna like it, and I might be going to jail for that.
That could be difficult, yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to like being legal or illegal or not. We're always in the gray area of it, all of us right here. And it's like, how do you wiggle between that tension? Like, have you guys had any experience being in that gray area and maybe almost falling off that gray area? Have you guys had that experience?
I organized a cabaret, and we were performing in an industrial space, so it wasn't exactly allotted, allowed to have a performance. And it was during COVID, so there was restrictions as to how many people could be in the venue, whether or not there could be drinks at the venue. And so we were like teetering on the line of legal, illegal, just by organizing this event. But I think it worked out successfully, just because that edge was something that inherently attracted the audience. I think that's what's kind of messed up about like this teetering, is that it's that excitement that really drives the audience that wants to come.
Have you had any experience like that?
Um,
Or like
I
even the
don't
tension, feeling the tension of it?
Yeah, I can feel those tension because especially during the pandemic, all
Yeah.
those performance things was kind of banned, and also we are so afraid of those social distancing thing. Yeah, so and also many art form, maybe like performance art, they're often doing some kind of thing. Maybe they would take off their clothes, naked your body, as what you said. So I witnessed some kind of like police arrest performance artist because he is doing some kind of performance being naked outside. And yeah, I feel the tension. Um, I'm also have some question. I'm wondering, what do you guys think that since the title is Contemporary Underground, we are not just talking about underground, right? So how do you think about the contemporary art try to include the underground art into some kind of gallery space, white cube, or some kind of museum? And do you think there's some kind of conflict between it, and how can they combine?
I think there's definitely appeal to the masses when they incorporate underground art into the white cube space, but I think there's an authenticity that's lost when in a white cube where someone that authoritative in the artist space comes and appropriates like underground art for higher art purposes.
Yeah, I agree. There's always an argument. I mean, there is a band in Hong Kong in the 80s and 90s called Beyond, that they were playing a lot of rock music. They're underground to promote rock, but at the end they got signed, and then the underground scene back then, from an interview of the band, Wang Gakui, the leader, has said, if you want to promote something underground, why not get yourself onto like media, and then it actually helps to spread the subculture kind of stuff. So I think it's arguable. Some people are slightly more hardcore, I guess, and I think it's a balance. But I totally get what you mean. Somehow it kind of loses a little bit of the essence, I suppose, if it's in a White Cube gallery. What do you guys think?
Me, I mean, I'm in between being underground and working for an institution. I think me, when I'm in the institution, I think we have to support underground. It's like a balance. We're creating a balance. I totally do agree that we're creating a balance. And a lot of the time is that without that balance, we wouldn't know what's out there. Here,
Yeah.
me as from an institution standpoint. But at the underground standpoint, when I do underground shows, for me, it's just like, it's a way to build community that institutions don't have. Like there's always that line that it's hard to cross for institutions to build that community. And I think underground does that for us. For instance, in music, there's underground music always. I'm sure a lot of indie bands, a lot of noise music, DJ, and all that stuff. They don't get to be presented by institutions, and it's always so disappointing for me. There's always that struggle, whether it's because of the COVID regulations or whether it's just that there could be censorships, etc. And so I think me, at an institution standpoint, that I have to find that balance. I have to, in a way, include them as much as I can. I could be looking for a venue who is maybe less strict on that. I can present these artists that have not been supported before. I could also initiate collaborations between these people just to have them in, and for our audience here, general audience, to get to know these people. But also, I think, going back to just finding a balance. You know, what do you guys think about working with institutions? Because, well, the two of us actually work for institutions, but we're also always trying to find that balance, or like finding that answer to who are we. Yeah,
because I think as an institution that we always want to support those artists without resources and try to give them a venue or monetary support, different kind of support for giving them a platform to presenting their artwork, express themselves. So I feel like the conflict might not be that serious, and from my point of view, like where I'm work, like Etienne, that we always providing platform from underground music and different kind of artists, but I do get that when you move this kind of underground art or music in the institution, we lost some kind of audience that may usually they would gather in the underground space, but it's always great to approach new audience and expand your community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It feels like this year community is quite like a thing that people are aware, like the impact of your action would that affect community. Does it play a major part of you guys' work?
Yeah. Well, one of the point of these like party club events that drag is performed at is to facilitate a festive environment in which the queer community can foster. So I feel as though there's like a deep connection with my arts practice between that and the development of queer solidarity.
So in a way, sometimes we might break some kind of like gray area law, but we are good people. Like somehow I think like for some people, maybe for my parents, when you tell them underground people, they'll be like, ooh, what do they do? Like naughty. But in a way, those like alternative groups of people, we are just trying to do things and get by, I suppose. So if there is a taboo, I don't think so. It's a bit like skater. Like people actually say skater are actually super nice. They don't laugh at you. You can just practice. I think it's all similar, no matter what you practice in a way, right?
Do you think today the term underground is like still a taboo in a way in this society we're in? Do you think it is something that the general public or the wider society is trying to avoid in a way? Do you think so?
Maybe for some people, like when I said like generations, that could be wrong too. But I guess, yeah, it must be. For some people, it might sound a bit edgy, I suppose.
I don't think there's so much hostility as there is like disinterest. There's like with how unique underground arts can be and how selecting the audience can be, there's a tendency to act kind of dispassionately towards something that you don't understand. And so when it comes to underground art, it's like there's just something that you don't understand as opposed to something that's provocatively bad.
It's interesting you pointed out like maybe others don't understand or even maybe they refuse to understand. I think that also could be a reason to. Have you guys had this experience where people coming to you being like, I don't understand what you're doing? And how do you work with that?
Every now and then, I don't even know what I'm doing. I have this like really hardcore self-doubt every now and then. That's why I want to throw a question earlier. I mentioned, what do you guys do with your low motivation times? But no, not really, because I'm kind of underground, so not a lot of people would come up to me, what is that means. So it doesn't happen to me, which is, I think, good. Miko or Joseph?
Yeah, I do agree that that I don't know what I'm doing, so that's why I'm making art. If sometimes I know what I'm doing, what I want to say, so I should just say it.
True.
Instead of just creating something that need people to understand me. So why would I not doing that directly? But yeah, I do agree that underground art had this kind of tendency or maybe that people would find it provocative. But I feel like nowadays that with all the internet, you can Google, oh, what is punk? That, oh, I can listen to a bunch of punk music instead of like back to 30 years ago, I need to sneak in and some kind of punk concert. So I feel like with the internet, we can build a community and online and such kind of digital commonness, you can find your ally. So I feel like internet can create some kind of community space, or maybe for different kind of people to get each know other. If even you are doing something very niche and edgy, what do you think about internet?
I think the internet is like a different underground here.
Yeah.
It's like maybe underground that could be. Because it's just, it embodies so much. There's so much in it, and that means there's a lot more possibilities to it, definitely. And I think that it also kind of hints to is that being in that underground or even on the internet, you get to try things out. It's like you get to test things out without thinking so much about, oh, how's my audience going to think about, or like how is this going to be received. But in the underground situation, whenever I do underground improv shows and stuff, I don't worry about that. I just go on. I just try it out. I don't care what you think. We can talk about it later over beer or whatever. You can tell me how much you don't like it. It's fine. Let's talk about it later. But I get to try things out now. And then, yeah. What about you? Do you have that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain added pressure when I'm in like an entertainment kind of venue to entertain the audience. But depending on the venue, right? Like there's certain venues that are more accommodating for the more artsy take without questions asked. And there's some venues that expect like a yes queen kind of atmosphere. When it comes to my theater practice, I guess I like to approach it with the similar approach as Joseph, where I kind of do whatever I want and questions are asked later.
I do agree, like underground music or maybe performance, they often take the approach of improvisation, or sometimes they just want to experiment something and not afraid there will be something fail, or they will be so sophisticated or so fine at some time. So I feel like that energy that you just want to experience something or try things out is really crucial for underground people. And how about you, Go Home?
I think it makes sense. We were earlier talking about getting into trouble, like we're doing something in gray area. I think it's the urge of doing things. Normally, I would do a bit of risk assessment. What if I get caught? What is the worst case scenario? If I could take it, I would do it. So normally, that's how I measure my actions. But I do think just do it instantly and without too much care. It's easy to say than do sometimes. But yeah, I think it's the urge of doing things which makes the underground scene energetic, let's say, because people want to do things.
Yeah, it's like noise music. Sometimes they say noise is it's like going against a rule. It's going against something that has existed or like conventionally existed. But you know, there are the people who are there to make this noise experience. They love noise. There's always like a bunch of people who would go to these noise shows, and they're like totally enjoying it. And it's hard to find them. And whenever it's on, you see the exact same crowd of people. Have you guys had this experience where you would go to this show that happens like kind of regularly, but you see the exact same people after months? It's like they're like the fans.
I think it happens because it seems like we have this community thing, so it always get a similar group of people, and hopefully it grows, hopefully it gets slightly more attention or share more love kind of stuff. But I think that's kind of normal, like bumping into the same kind of people.
Interesting. We have, do we want to try out the fishbowl questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is the biggest shifts in underground art scene in Hong Kong with relation to the socio-political environment?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Can I see this again?
Sure.
What's the biggest shift or change in underground art scene in Hong Kong with relation to the socio-political environment?
To me, I see more people doing things like what we have talked about before, and I think the internet actually encouraged everything like bottom-up self-organization, because you can use like social media. If you want to promote it, you can promote it, or if you want to share your work, you can use social media to share your work. So I guess the internet plus what had happened actually create some bottom-up action. It's people are not waiting for institutions or whoever give us opportunity, but yeah, just do it. Think about consequences and then just do it, which I think it's interesting, and it can be very healthy because people are just doing things.
I've actually been in conversations with some of the music programming and curators in the scene, and I was actually quite surprised to see that a lot of them have plans to have music going underground or performances underground, because there are just so many limitations we're seeing in institutions or like public venues and stuff. I myself have experienced something like that too. And it's a very interesting change, because it seems like so far I'm seeing a lot more interesting things underground. A lot more people trying out different things. Maybe they're coming from the indie music or like even bands, and they would come out and try these improvisations doing a motorcycle indoor, something like that. And I think it's something that has been inside them for a long time, perhaps. And this is finally the time to release it. I don't know, like maybe that there's a social tension that has encouraged the shift. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do agree with internet that I feel like internet is more easy for underground people to connect with those your allies in the foreign country, that like there are so many platforms for this kind of underground things, that they were like reposing what the people was doing in underground all around the world, and keep on promoting each other, and even can be facing more broader scope of audience. As sometimes in Hong Kong, maybe your audience is just only that 100 people, but with the internet you can turn into 10,000 of people sometimes. So I feel like the biggest change to me is how internet connect this kind of people and build a kind of community together.
Yeah.
Do you think the internet helped you to reach out to more audience in Hong Kong in a way that's like they have not been familiar with, or like even have been an underground art scene experience at all, but they're here to try? Do you think there are more people who are willing to try with the support of the internet?
Feels like it. Yeah, I do feel like it. There are more text, there are more illustration in public space apparently in the past few years. So yeah, I do think people are trying out, which is nice.
Good to see new faces, I guess. The new faces. In what way does collaboration play into your art process?
Oh, collaboration is like one of the bedrocks of my performance making process. I value feedback as much as I value my own artistic inspirations. But collaboration, at the end of the day, is a really corroborative process that I think really enriches any kind of art piece.
Yeah, for my own practice, I'm in a artist studio, and also many of my friends, they are like doing some kind of collaborative practice. I feel like it's good for this kind of practice happen in the art circle, because I feel like people in the art circle usually have a very big ego. When you're creating something, you think, oh, I'm the best. Yeah, I have a better idea, my art is the best. So sometimes it's good to put down your ego and try to compromise with other people and trust in other people, and eventually there is so much more possibility will happen when you're collaborating with people. Yeah, so I enjoy this kind of play. Yeah.
Me too. I mean, for me, I think when we play music, it's like, oh, you get to jam with all these people. But then for me, music, it's almost like a medium for me to meet new people, for me to get to know that person. Because I think the personal relationship of me and this collaborator always contributes to the work itself. And I love seeing the contribution of it. It's sometimes so inspiring that I almost don't care about the work itself. I care about that relationship that we had and that moment, the experience we had. And yeah, it means so much to me, I think.
I remember I joined one artist in residency a few years back, and collaboration actually forced me to do things differently. It's a bit like putting down ego and stuff, which I think is beneficial because everyone do different things. There's no answer to like art, music, performance, right? So working with different people, you earn that like different perspective or ways of doing things as well, I suppose, which is a good practice.
I know some people kind of just like refuse to collaborate because they think that they want to stick with their own practice. But I also think that what if we are open to it? What if someone can change our practice? Isn't that really interesting?
Yeah.
Like I felt like I have changed so much throughout the years because I have met so many people, great people like you guys that I'm talking to today. And I'm sure that has somehow a contribution to it. Have you guys had like this one work or one moment that you think you didn't expect it to come, but because you met someone or someone has brought a change to you? In a way, have you had?
Yeah, I think so. It was that collaboration. It was three of us. One is a set designer, the other one is an illustrator, and it was in Iceland. And then because we were doing that project in the summer, so the sun never set in Iceland, and one of the guy had the idea of building a big camera obscure because of the sunlight. So it was pretty much the first large-scale project that I've ever done in public space as well. So yeah, that's quite memorable to me. Have you ever done something that you remember, collaboration?
That involved collaboration in a way that changed my perspective on my practice. I think my film that I did, it was really, it really changed my perspective on my art practice because there was so much input from other art practitioners. Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah, yeah. From some kind of previous practice, I have been like invited by friends in some kind of like offsite exhibition and those kind of like environment choosing by our friends, and also we are exchanged with using different kind of material that maybe I'm using their material, they're using my material. This kind of practice, I feel like we have a better relationship together, and I value the collaboration and the relationship created from the collaboration, and I feel like there's very beautiful things inside that how I can collaborating with someone because I trust them. Yeah, because we got this kind of bonding between us, and I value a lot about that experience instead of the output of that artwork itself. Yeah.
Would you collaborate with someone whom you don't trust? Yeah,
You don't
the
trust.
person you don't trust. But you know, you're in a situation like this. Like, what do you do?
I think I could handle myself. My artistic process is basically like essay writing at this point, in that it's a structured process, and so if there was someone who infringed on trust between, in the collaboration process, I would think that my artistic process would take precedent. That's hypothetical.
I'm not sure. I mean, usually in life, I would choose to trust people at the first time, and then if whatever happened, then I might put priority, like if that person is trustworthy. So I would go for it normally and see what comes up afterward. If it's kind of a bad experience, next time I might put it into like lower priority, something like that. Joseph?
Yeah, I got an experience that I was doing a performance for the first time, like something like performance art. That when I'm doing the performance art, there's one of the stranger, but not exact stranger. She is also a performer in that event. That she intervened my performance and performed it with me, and that time kind of such a sudden break in, and I was very nervous in that time, but eventually I feel those trust and during the process, and I feel that kind of intimacy when I interacting with her. So I feel like, yeah, eventually from the collaboration that we will maybe start with many different kind of argument or untrust, but eventually everything will solve out. Yeah, I have that belief, yeah.
Wow, wow. I would have freaked out. Like, badly. On this note, I'd like to open the floor for if you have any questions. You're welcome to talk to us, ask us.
Hi, thank you so much for the conversation so far. I'm just wondering if you could all share a bit about any artists or creatives that have influenced or inspired your works.
This is a hard one.
It's a good and very difficult questions to answer. I'll go first. I would pick Mona Hatem as an artist that I look up to, and I think she must have done some influence on my work or subject matters too. What about Miko?
I love Shirin Neshat's work as it comments on gender. She's this Middle Eastern multimedia artist, and her approach to gender ideologies has been inspirational for my drag art.
I think is composer John Cage. I know this is lame, like everybody says it, but he's still he is still a very important composer to this day for us, because he's the first person who kind of broke through the entire conventional music making process, and still today his works are super influential, although we don't play it much anymore. And he's the first person who introducing silence to sound, to music, silence as part of music and sound, which today I still believe that, and it almost changed all parts of me, I think. Yeah.
I would say there is a group called Online that they are a group that promoting a kind of a genre called crisis core, and they were starting like doing the upside exhibition as I mentioned and putting up there online. So they have promoting this kind of form of art that was very influenced my own practice, and there were some kind of friends who were doing this kind of genre in Hong Kong called Simulacrum and also Video Cipher. So feel free to check out their work. They're extremely cool. Yeah.
Okay, send me later, please.
Basically, to look for more underground information, follow Joseph.
No,
Yes.
no. Follow them. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think our audience is a bit shy, but I have a question. Do you have any kind of, like, leading off that point, do you have any kind of emerging artists that you would recommend, whether in Hong Kong or people we can look up abroad who are kind of diving into the underground scene or really coming up to become a bit more mainstream or popular?
It's a very interesting question, because I don't feel like I'm supposed to promote underground stuff here today. I kind of kept everything anonymous at this point. But there is a lot going on. But why don't I switch the question a little bit? How do other people get to know our scene? What would you guys do to have our audience here to get to know our scene today?
There are specific Instagram pages that you can follow to get to know more of the drag scene. Drag Jam on Instagram is one of them. They host a lot of different events across Hong Kong, and that's, yeah.
I think go out more, like leave your comfort zone. I mean, off-site exhibition could be in a jungle, I suppose, or abandoned building, and that could be interesting or inspiring, hopefully, or like underground clubs as well.
Yeah.
So go out more, dig the internet, and follow Joseph.
No, don't follow me. Speaking of Jack Jam, Eton is doing our Pride Month program. We invite Jack Jam for some Jack workshop and performance, so feel free to come and yeah.
There we go. I think I should mention this. The Food Tech building in Wan Chai. I think that's like when a lot of overseas artists come to me and talk about, oh, you know this place, Food Tech building, they all refer this building as like the underground base in a way, which I find is super interesting because you guys must have been there. There's like bookstore in the top floor, and then there are a couple studios, exhibition spaces in other floors, and at the elevator space, there's like a little magazine area where they would put all the leaflets and stuff. I think that's where I would get my information, because you would see leaflets where there's only a time, location, and that's basically it. Maybe like a photo of what's happening, and then people will literally take one and then somehow brought a bunch of friends to those exhibitions and shows, and I find it super interesting. And we somehow still use paper as a way to reach out to people at that point. Yeah, Food Tech building.
富德樓 in Cantonese.
富德樓.
富德樓.
Yeah, Wan Chai Fu Dak Lao. There's an excellent bookstore in the top floor. Yeah. Any other?
Hello. Yes. I do have some thoughts to share. Not exactly a question. Because I think thank you so much for the sharing. I think you have touched upon quite a lot of different aspects of how we see underground. But I agree with Joseph that the term underground could be a little bit misleading and maybe a bit problematic. Because what I was hearing is somehow a bit the site, and somehow is a bit about the aesthetic in relation to the so-called mainstream. And somehow it could also be related to the artist's intention of to do it publicly or not. So I think in this whole talk, I was also thinking the term underground could be interchangeable with the term alternative space. I'm not sure if that's correct or how you feel about it. Yeah, so I think we have also touched a point about practices that is having a different cultural background, for example, drag, and how you guys, because some of you are from a more institutional background, and how do you incorporate with the somehow like, or recontextualize all this event in your curation, for example? And how do all these art events kind of like repurpose the whole space or site? Because, for example, like for a drag show, to show in a nightclub for me is something that is embedded in the culture, like in the site itself. But if you're doing a drag show in Tycoon Contemporary, for example, it's going to be a totally different approach. And how does that absorb by the institution, or like to make use of that? So yeah, so I have a feeling that it is a very complicated kind of like things, but I'm just curious about how you define underground and what is it different from alternative space, and how the repurposing of space, and how do you let people know this is underground, or maybe this is the purpose of them keeping them private. And yeah, I'm some feelings that when I was hearing the whole discussion.
Thank you. I think his interpretation is pretty legitimate, actually. You actually wrap up the whole thing for us. Yeah, I think alternative is one of the keywords. And my personal keyword for like what is underground is word of mouth. Usually you don't see like a big poster on the MTR it's more like word of mouth, or you dig into some kind of like alternative events, gigs, or venue. That's what's underground to me. Joseph or Karen?
I think for me, it's community. It's not about. I mean, there is part of this that's related to the aesthetics. I think, definitely. I think, but it is the community that kind of defines it, because it is word of mouth. Definitely, the words that define this community base. And going back to the question of us being and the institution, but how do we define underground? I mean, I refuse to define it, almost, because I don't represent it, or nobody represents it. I don't think anybody represents it. I don't think anybody belongs to underground, or I don't think anybody should be telling people I'm from underground. I mean, nobody does that, right? And I like to maybe like touch on this example I had, is that at Contemporary Music King, I have this program called Sonic Anchor. It happens 4 times a year, where I would invite artists to try out new things, whether they're sound artists who would like to try different disciplines or different approaches, or people who are not sound artists but they want to apply sound into their own practice. And then I was talking to a friend. He runs this underground sound music improvisation show regularly as well, maybe 4 times a year as well. But he does it in the rooftop of someone's house, someone's industrial building studio, and someone's shop, etc. And we almost had this very heated argument on, do we need to define each other? We're almost the same thing. We're almost doing the same thing, almost. But do we need to separate that? And it's not an argument. I totally agree with him, is that maybe there's no need to define it. Maybe there is no need to have a line between it. We could share the same bunch of artists, because they would be doing different things, I think. Yeah, there's so many elements to this that would change their approach. And I find it super interesting. That's why I don't think there's a need to define it. Sorry, I'm talking too much, isn't it? I don't know, what's your take on?
Yeah, I agree both with you, and what I value more maybe is how underground experimenting things, because they don't afraid that they're doing something without audience to watch. They'll just want to do it and make it now, and no matter if it fails or not, they were still wanting to do it. And I feel like this action and energy is what it needs for underground, and I don't feel like we need to label something as underground or contemporary art, although I just talking about that, oh, we are putting underground art in a contemporary art setting. But I feel like ultimately all this art form are the same, that the artist just want to try something out and make something makes him happy, that or expressing themselves, and that is more crucial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
No.
I think that's a good point to wrap it up. I'm going to volunteer my speakers if anyone was too shy to ask them a question, to ask them after off stage. But join me in thanking them for this talk.